Hello, and thanks for joining us for another episode of Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement, here at the News Forum, where all voices matter. I'm pleased to welcome Keyli Loeppky to the program. Keyli is the Director of Interprovincial Affairs for the Canadian Federation of Independent Business. Lots to talk about here regarding Canada's internal trade barriers. Thanks for joining us, Keyli.
Thanks so much for having me.
I guess the first question is, can you give a description for our audience of how interprovincial trade works in this country and perhaps how it doesn't work?
Yeah, well, Canada is supposed to be an economic union, but it doesn't appear to work that way. Over a number of years, provinces have maintained their control over their regulations, and we've really resulted in a patchwork approach right across the country where each province has a different set of rules. And what that causes is barriers for the movement of goods, services, and labor across the country.
So, can you give us an idea historically about why these interprovincial trade barriers have persisted throughout the decades?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of reasons. First off, provinces are looking to protect their local industries. There's always someone in the government's ear saying, don't let them into the province. We're doing well here. So that's one of the reasons. The second is really the province is trying to maintain control over regulating the pieces that it has jurisdiction over. They don't want to let up control to say, yeah, we're good with what the neighboring province is doing. And the third is governments have really faced little pressure to fix these issues. There's never been a significant need for us to do this. But in the light of everything that's been happening, trade tensions with the US, really now is the time where governments are saying, whoa, we need to be able to do this within Canada.
Does the federal government have the power and authority to fix this issue, though?
Really, most of the pieces lie with the provinces and the territories. That's where there's differences in the regulation that's prohibiting the movement of food, good, and services. But the federal government does have a role to play when it comes to bringing all the provinces and territories to the table, making sure that they're talking to one another, having that forum for them to be able to do so. But there is one area where the federal government does play an important role, and that's on the movement of food. Right now, the federal government is who regulates food through the Canadian Food Inspection Agency.
Right.
And to be able to move food freely between provinces and territories, we need the government to back down on this a little bit and give some control over to the provinces.
So, when they need to, like when it comes to food, as you mentioned, the federal government does have some regulatory authority there.
That's right. So, right now, the way that it works is if a business wants to be able to move its food across the country, it has to be approved and stamped off by the CFIA. If you're just a business looking to move your food within your home province, provincial food inspection is good enough. What we'd like to see is that provincial food inspection allows you to move your products from one province into another without additional requirements.
Mm.
Why isn't a burger in Alberta good enough for the next door neighbors in Saskatchewan to be able to consume without this additional layer of red tape, paperwork, testing requirements? We're not so different as Canadian provinces that we should have 14 separate sets of rules. The 10 provinces, the three territories, and the federal government all don't need to have separate rules when it comes to these things.
Are there provinces, Keely, that are more advanced in understanding that there should be a level playing field and reduce some of the barriers, or is this a problem with every province?
Certainly, we've seen some provinces step up to be leaders on the internal trade file, especially in the last year or so. I'll point to British Columbia. They've really been the champion behind mutual recognition, which we can get deeper into, but that's basically the next step on freeing up internal trade in Canada. Nova Scotia is another big player for a small province. They were some of the first to have legislation on mutual recognition. They've been leaders on working groups talking about things like alcohol and food. So, really important leaders from the provinces there. Then I also will give kudos to the federal government over the last 2 or 3 years. They've really done a good job of bringing folks to the table. They've implemented their own legislation. We've seen a new internal trade data hub from the federal government. So I do think that there is some kudos to be given there.
Yeah, I do want to unpack that a little bit more. I think that's important that our audience understand exactly what the premiers and the prime minister have agreed to. We are going to take a brief break, however. We'll be back after these messages.